GC co-creators, Lilou here on the beautiful magical island of Maui in Hawaii, sitting next to Wayne Dyer. I am so excited.
Nice to see you. Mwah.
This is awesome. I love the mwah. You have that magic mwah. I heard it many times.
Yes.
Well, this is really exciting. I was interviewing this morning your daughter, Serena.
Right.
That is very inspiring, that grew in a spiritual family. She has been blessed to be taught at a very young age some of those really principles that we should all be raised by. What do you feel, after all the books that you have written, after all the travels that you have done, all the people that you have met, what are the most important to you values, things that we should know while growing up?
Yeah. Well, I just completed writing a book just 2 days ago. It's called Wishes Fulfilled, and it's basically a representation of where I am at this time in my life. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with leukemia, and I really bought into the diagnosis. I've come to understand that all illness in our bodies is really preceded by our energy bodies, and that so often what we call illness is nothing more than our body's way of healing. For example, if I were to cut my arm right now, and immediately what would happen is that all kinds of white blood cells would start rushing towards there, and before long a scab would form, and then it would get all red, and it would look horrible. And if you just came out of nowhere and just looked at this thing on my arm, you'd say, oh my gosh, that's an awful thing, we better cut that out. When in fact, that is just the body's way of healing, creating a scab, getting all the red inflammation and so on, all the pus that's there, all of that is part of the healing process. And I began to look at leukemia the same way, as just the body's way of responding to perhaps psychological traumas, from failed relationships in the past or whatever it is, and that the body just always knows what it's doing, and the body is perfect. So you ask what the values are. What I've discovered in the last year or so in this writing is that who we are is not really these bodies at all. And I've talked about this, and there's a lot of that in the literature and so on, but when you come really face to face with it and begin to understand it, that there is something much grander to who we are than just this physical form. For example, I'm sitting here with you, a beautiful woman. I'm 71 years old. You're whatever age you are, and if I were to ask you, are you your body? And you were to say, yeah, well, this is who I am. This is my body. I'd say, well, how many bodies have you been in? Just since you incarnated on just this lifetime. Since the time you were in one about this big, one that weighed 8 or 9 pounds. You were in a 20-pound body. You were in a little toddler body. You were in a teenage body. You were in a 20-year-old body. And you say, are they real? Are they real? And you'd say, well, of course they're real. I'd say, well, then go get one. Bring me back your 20-year-old body, and I'll go get mine, and we'll bring it into this room, and we'll diagnose it, and we'll look at it, and we'll talk about it. And you say, well, I can't do that because it's gone. And one of my teachers was Muktananda, and Muktananda, the great spiritual saint from India, said that when he was asked what is real, he said, that is real which never changes. So when you think about your body being real, I mean, if it's like you think about something that never changes, that's obviously not your body. It's nothing in this physical plane whatsoever. Everything we're looking at here, including this ocean and the trees and this room and this couch and all of that, it's all changing. And ultimately, it all just returns back to its invisible source. So that's true of the body that we're in now as well, that it's really, it's not who we are. That who we are is that invisible presence that keeps occupying all of these new bodies. Like from the time that you sat down here to talk to me and the time that we finish, you will be in a different body than you were in when we started. Our bodies are changing that much. The trillions and trillions of cells and so on, always in a constant state of flux and change. So it's like really learning that who we are is something much more complex, something much more profound, something much more spiritual than just a physical body that, I've often said that, life is nothing more than a sexually transmitted terminal disease. It's like, it's just the nature of everything that shows up. So what I discovered and what I learned with this diagnosis of leukemia is that there is something within me that defies having a name. But I've come up with a name for it, and I didn't come up for the name with it. God came up with a name for it. If you go back to the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and look at in Exodus, Moses is walking out in the desert in the Sinai, and all of a sudden he comes across this bush, and it's burning and burning and burning, but it's not being consumed. And the bush suddenly, ancient legend tells us, starts speaking, and it's God speaking. And God is giving Moses these directions, and he's telling him, go back to Israel and free your people. And he says to God, I'm shortening this, he says to God, well, who should I tell him that sent me? And he said, and it's the only place, the only reference in any spiritual literature, and this is 1,300 years BC, before the birth of Christ, 1,300 years before that, 13 centuries. God says to Moses, my name is I am that I am, and that shall be my name for all future generations. I am that I am. So that's our name. That's the name of God. And that's really the name of the invisible presence that's in each and every one of us. I am. So how we use the name I am is really how we use the name of God. In the Old Testament, in the book of Joel, it says, let the weak man say, I am strong. Jesus is asked, about being God, and he said that even before Abraham was I am. And almost every important thing that Jesus says in the New Testament begins with I am. I am the way, the truth, and the light. I am the resurrection. He didn't say I'm the crucifixion. Too often we put all of our emphasis on the crucifixion and the suffering, and that's one of the reasons why we have so many problems in this world. It's because we have all these Christian people focusing on the crucifixion and on the suffering and on the wounds and on the thorns and the horrors of being nailed to a cross. I remember when 2 of my little girls were at a private school in the 2nd grade, and one of them came home and said, I can't stand going into the chapel because every time I look at that, I see this dead man on this piece of wood, and it's like it just bothers me so much. And she asked if we actually had to move her out of the school because it was so troubling for her, because they insisted that she go. And I just think that Jesus should be seen as the resurrection. That's what he said, the light, the endless spiritual light that's in each and every one of us. And I've discovered that about myself, and I began to stop saying I am a cancer patient, and I began to say I am well, I am perfect health, I am divine health, I am healing, I am content, and very carefully using this phrase I am in my life to recognize it. In the New Testament it says, Jesus says he said to the people who are about to stone him, he said, why would you stone me? And they say, well, because you claim to be a man, and you're not, and you claim to be God, and you're a man. And he said, is it not written in your laws that I have said you are gods, that you're all gods? That God isn't some external thing that's outside of us. God is something that's deep within us, each and every one of us. And that's what I've been writing about in the new book. In the 3rd chapter, I call it Your Highest Self. Your higher self is recognizing that there's a spark of God inside of you. It's just a little tiny piece, and every once in a while you call on it. But when you begin to get to your highest self, you begin to recognize that God is not something outside of you, that every thought that you have is really a thought of God. And right here in this room, there's you and I, and my son is sitting over there. But there's 3 people, but there's only one mind. And we're all using that mind. And it's a question of whether we stay in alignment with God. Einstein was asked a question about quantum physics, and he said it's all details to me. He said, all I'm interested in is learning to think like God thinks. So as this began to unfold, as it began to happen on the 21st of April this year in 2011, I had a magical experience. There's a man who lives down in Abadiânia in Brazil. He's
John of God, yeah.
Called John of God. And I have a very dear friend, her name is Reina Piscova. She's a medical doctor, She's an eye surgeon in California. And she wanted me to go down there. She flew here to Maui because she heard that I had leukemia, and she knew that I could be healed. And she knew that John of God could do this kind of healing with me. And I had agreed to go originally, but then April came, and I have this deadline on this book, and this book wasn't just something that I was writing, it was writing me. It owned me. It just, each day I would just go over to my writing space, and everything would just pour out of me. I mean, it was this automatic writing, which I've experienced in the past, but nothing like with the intensity of this. And and I didn't have an outline. I really didn't. When I started this book, it's really about manifesting from a place of spirit, recognizing that you don't get what you want, you get what you are, and so becoming God and living from that place and being willing to say, I am God. You know, like St. Paul says in Philippians, he says, have in you the same mind as Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. This is right out of the New Testament. So I've taken a whole lot of that. Anyway, so Reina went down to Abadiânia in Brazil by herself. She wanted me to go. She was disappointed that I didn't go, but she went anyway. And she went, and when she got there, she asked John of God if he would do a healing on me. And she showed him 4 photographs that were taken of me, all dressed in white, that were taken down there, from the front, from the back, from each side. And he looked at them and he said, I'm sorry, he said he has to be taking the herbs and he has to be drinking the blessed water. So she went to a FedEx location, and she went and got herself the herbs that I would need and the water. She had it all FedEx to me, up here to me. I took it. It took 3 days to get here. It came. I was re-photographed after taking the herbs. She took the photos into him on Monday or Tuesday morning, and he said, I will now do surgery on him on Thursday, or surgery will be performed on him on surgery, because he doesn't do the surgery. These entities enter into his body. Now, I went into all of this with a dose of skepticism about someone doing surgery on me from 10,000 miles away in the middle of the night. But on the other hand, I've always said, have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. So I participated in it, and I had the surgery. It was 7 o'clock in the morning on the 21st of April. I remember because it was my mother's 95th birthday. And she told me, she said, after you have this surgery, she said, you will, I had to go to bed, wear white, drink certain water, have these herbs taken. I had to do all of these things, not eat certain kinds of foods, not certain activities I had to. I did everything that I was instructed to do. Mm-hmm. But the next morning, it was 7 a.m., and the surgery was over about 7:30. And I told Raina, I said, well, I'm going to go for my walk, and I'm going to swim and do the things that I always do, the exercise, because I do exercise every day. She said, you just had surgery. You won't be able to do that. You have to go back into bed for 24 hours. I said, I can't go back to bed for 24 hours. I just came out of bed. So she said, well, you'll have to. She said, so I said, well, okay. And I ignored it, and I went to go for a walk. I usually walk about an hour and a half. And I got about 100 yards, and I collapsed. I just was so weak that I just barely made it back into my room. I went into bed. Two of my kids were here. They brought me water and things, and I stayed in bed for not just 24 hours. I stayed in bed for basically a week, 1 full week recovering from the surgery. And then I had, the week after that, on the 28th of April, I had what's called the removal of the sutures. And I was again prepared for this. You wear white, you have, you do your prayers, you eat certain kind of foods and so on. By now I was much more of a believer that something really divine was going on here, that this man who has treated over 20 million people over the last 40 years in Brazil has never had any infection. In fact, Oprah Winfrey sent a crew down to Abadiânia to find out what about this guy, because as soon as I said his name, you knew what I was talking about. And these entities enter into his body. He doesn't use any anesthesia. He doesn't use any antiseptic. He's scraping people's eyes. He's cutting into their abdomens. He's pulling things out of them. And he does the surgery also, what they call invisible surgery. He just does it from a distance. But he isn't really doing it. These entities, whoever these entities are, some of them they're identified as former physicians that lived, and some of them are spirit guides.
So he literally opened you up. It was not just on the non-physical.
It was no. He was in Brazil, and I was here in Maui. Okay. So there was no opening up. So when I came out of the surgery, I came in, and my son, who's sitting right over there, looked at me and said, "What in the world is wrong with you? Your eye has all." It looked like my eye had all been scraped. I had no pupils at all, just little dots in my pupils. But the most amazing thing happened is that I was infused with a kind of love, very much like the kind of thing that you're doing on this juicy tour of yours, that has not gone away at all. In fact, it's just I have just been having encounters after encounter with people, and it's one of the reasons I agreed to do this, because I don't do interviews very often anymore.
I have no idea how this happened. This is a pure miracle to me.
So I told my daughter she was doing the interview, and I said, well, she probably would like to interview me. Why don't you ask her? And it was just a reaching out kind of thing. But this is minor compared to the kinds of things that have been happening, the people who've been come into my life, and somehow my ego was just taken right out of my life, and it was just like washed away, and it was replaced with this overwhelming sort of divine, peaceful countenance. And a healing began to take place in my life. Now, I gave up yoga for a year after I had my diagnosis of leukemia, because they told me it's too hot. I do Bikram yoga, which is a 90-minute intense workout. I just came back from it. I just did it this morning. I do it every day. And I was sleeping until 10, 11 o'clock, and I was getting lethargic, and people were telling me you don't look so well, and so on. And after the removal of the sutures, everything in my life changed. I began to get messages, and one morning I got a message that said, "You do not go for a walk today. Go to yoga. You are now healed. You can go to yoga." So I went to the yoga studio, which I hadn't been to in a year, and I did yoga, and I've been doing it 4 or 5 times a week ever since, getting better and better and better. I now get up at about 4 o'clock in the morning again, like I was doing years ago, meditating for an hour, and then going out and just doing things for people. And so just recently, I took 162 people to 3 spiritual sites. It's called a journey called Experiencing the Miraculous, and we filmed the entire thing. It'll be available in another 6 months or so through Hay House, 6 DVDs. And I lectured in Assisi, the home of St. Francis, in Lourdes, where's the great miracle of St. Bernadette in 1858, and in Medjugorje, in Herzegovina, Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Hence your hat.
Pardon?
Hence your hat, no?
Yes, that's right. I got this in Lourdes. So when we got to Assisi, there was 162 of us. My son, 2 of my daughters went on this trip with me, and we went to Assisi. Now, Assisi is a place that has been very, very magical for me. I've been there 3 times. This was my 3rd visit. I wrote a book based on the prayer of St. Francis. St. Francis came into my life in a very, very big way, as did LILOU'S, who came into my life in a very big way when I wrote an entire book on the Tao and how to live the Tao Te Ching, called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. So both of these people showed up in my life, and when these things happen in your life, when somebody just shows up, and you'll get that even as you look back on this interview, you'll look back at this years from now and see that it's part of a tapestry, that it isn't just an isolated little event that is happening, because what's basically happening is that everything is happening at once, and the future and the past are just really just all illusions, that it's just all one. And you begin to get that. Meditation gives you a little flavor, a little touch of it. In your dreams, you get a sense of it, where you can literally become someone else and be 7 years old and be 80 years old and have people that are dead be alive, and so on. All of this is just, it's like we are at our greatest, Thoreau said, when we are in our dreams awake. So in Assisi, just a few weeks ago, I gave a lecture in each one of these cities. And there were 162 people in this ancient church that was built in the 10th century. And at the end of my talk, something happened to me that had never happened before. It will be on the film. I froze. on stage, and I began this like uncontrollable sobbing. Everybody in the audience stood up and reached their hands out, and it was as if St. Francis had literally entered into my body. And I felt his presence so strongly, and I keep thinking back of how many separate occasions. I wasn't raised Catholic. I was raised in orphanages and foster homes. I was never in any one particular place. And I've been exposed to all of these, but for some reason, this man, for whom the city of San Francisco is named, who lived back in the 13th century, and just devoted his life to Christ consciousness and living from that place, became such an important part of my life. I just received a letter from a woman who heard me speaking up in Vernon, British Columbia, and she said when I started talking about St. Francis, she actually saw me transform on the stage and had a brown robe, and I literally became St. Francis up there on the stage. And then she said an hour later you were speaking about Lao-Tzu and the Tao Te Ching and how impactful that was, and how ironic it was that these two people came into my life in so many different ways, so that I had to sit down and devote years of my life to studying their material and actually writing it and living from that. And what happened is there was a time when my ego would say, well, that's because I'm so special, and after all, I am Wayne Dyer, and I'm making a big impact in the world, and so on. But I began to realize that it has nothing to do with my having been them in a previous life. And there are no previous lives. There are only parallel lives. Everything's happening at once. And that when you begin to assume the feeling of a wish that you would like to have fulfilled, which is what I've done with this leukemia, it isn't just like an intellectual exercise where you say, I am well and I live from that perspective. It's like you begin to feel that in your body, and you experience the feeling of it, and you assume the feeling of whatever wish it is that you would like to have. You assume that it's already fulfilled. And when you do that on a really dramatic level, like on stage in Assisi, and you begin to talk about something that you not just know intellectually, but that you feel as a part of your life.
You embody?
Yeah, you become it, and it becomes you. St. Francis and you are no longer separate. You and Lao Tzu are no longer separate. You and God are no longer separate. You are one. You are one with everything. And it shows up. It shows up in photographs on orbs that show up at different places. It shows up, some people who have a clearer spiritual vision will literally see it.
So is there truly a process to that, or is it just by your presence in that moment that allowed that to come in? Because there is always that fine line between us being the co-creator, creating, putting it out, but also just receiving. It's a fine line, isn't it?
Well, it's
in the I amness, you're still constantly reminding yourself that you are healthy.
Yeah, but after a while, the intellectual exercise of saying the right words, I am, you get past the intellectual part of it. You know, in order to understand something intellectually, you have to analyze it. And the first four letters of analyze are anal. And so we tear it apart. That's what it means to analyze it, and we figure it out, and we come up with a formula, and we interpret it, and we get other people's opinions about it, and we go on the internet and we look things up, and we write papers about it, and we talk to experts about it, and that's how you understand something intellectually. To understand something spiritually, there's only one way. And very few people know how to do this, and that is you have to experience it. You have to, and experiencing what I'm speaking about, experiencing the awareness of I am God. We can write it down. There's lots of books written about it, and so on. But when you get to know it, you go past. You don't live as if this is something that you want to be. You see, God is never capable of saying I will be well. Because to say I will be well, or I will be wealthy, or I will be happy, or I will be content, or I will be fulfilled, is to say I am not. And if you're God, you can't say I am not. How can that which is the creator of all say I am not, or I will be? You are it already. Experientially, when you know that, when you really get that into your gut, you begin to see it, and then every internal message that you have, every meditation that you have, every experience that you have, everyone that you encounter, you begin to step back and you begin to realize, of course, this is all part of there's something bigger moving all these pieces around. And so you assume, and that's the key words here, you assume the feeling, and feeling is the key word. Intellectually, you analyze it and figure it out. To feel it, where do you feel it? You feel it in your body. You feel it in this temporary housing that you have for your soul. And once you start to feel it in your body and really feel it, you might want to, when down the road somewhere, interview a woman named Anita Moorjani. She lived in, she grew up in Singapore, she lives in Hong Kong, and she had stage 4 lymphoma throughout her entire body. She was given one more day to live. All of her organs had shut down. She had 24 tumors the size of lemons throughout her entire body, in her abdomen, in her breasts, in her stomach, in her legs, in her head. I mean, she was just loaded with cancer, okay? And she had had it for 4 years. And that night in the hospital in Hong Kong, in 2005 or 2006, it was February 2006, she died. She had what's called a near-death experience, an NDE. And in this near-death experience, she was told that it was not her time unless she wanted it to be, and that she could go back into her body, and that if she did, if she healed the energy body, that if she healed the energy around this cancer and what this cancer meant to her, and began to change that around, she could be cancer-free. 4.5 days after coming back from the depths of death and death's doorway, she was cancer-free, and today she will be on my public television special. She's written a book called, it won't be out until the spring. It's called Dying to Be Me. And what she discovered in there is what I'm speaking about here. That's why we've connected on such a deep level, and we speak like almost every day now. And she discovered that the only thing you have to do in order to become a manifester and attract into your life what you want is to treasure your own magnificence. And she said it's not like you make conscious contact with God and that you have a spark of God inside of you, but there's also the human part of you. You have to realize that you are altogether God, and that God is altogether you. And when you don't get that by doing that intellectually, you get that by feeling that, by feeling and understanding what Jesus meant when he said God is love. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. So this is what this experience is about. And this experience with John of God, for me, was the final step. It was the removing of the ego part of me and filling in that space with whatever the entities were. I had a watch on that night that the sutures were removed, right in the bedroom, right around the corner here. And when I came out, this is a watch, it's a Panerai watch. It was a $17,000 watch. My daughter insisted that I get this watch. It's guaranteed, and about 2 weeks before this happened, it's guaranteed to never lose a second, one way or the other. If it does, you get your money back, all right? It has a 10-day power supply built into it. It's very much like this one that I'm wearing here, but it was a different one. So I came out in the morning, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and I discovered that my watch, this watch that is guaranteed to never lose a second, had lost 80 minutes. That day and the next day it lost 80 minutes again, and the watch was rendered, and I had to take it back and get the money back because the electromagnetic field in Abadiânia in Brazil is faster and higher than any place on the planet, and it was in that bedroom that this watch had to be replaced. And so it's just lost 80 minutes of something happened in those 80 minutes. And what happened in those 80 minutes is that that I began to really not just know that I am God, intellectually, but to feel it everywhere that I go. And it's and I no longer identify with this body, with my accomplishments, with what I do. And you asked me at the beginning, like what values, whatever. It's this fundamental awareness that when you become God, when you really live from that place and align yourself with your source of being, and it becomes your daily way of living, which is why I'm sitting here doing this interview with you. It's just another example of Every single morning when I wake up, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, I say, what can I do to make somebody else's life better? What can I do, whatever it might be? And I have many opportunities to do that because I'm so well known, and I get lots of mail, and I can help people out who are sick in hospitals. I can donate money. I can, there's lots of things that I can do. But I'll just give you one example before we close this out. Usually I do a meditation, and the meditation lasts for 40 minutes or so. And then I get instructions in the meditation. And one morning, I was sitting right over here doing the meditation, and I was told internally, this was about 2 or 3 weeks after the John of God experience, where every day I was having these kinds of things, that I was encountering people that needed something, and at one time in my life I would have just ignored it or wait away, and now I just invite them into my life and embrace them and do something for them, and turn their lives around, change them in a really profound way. And this morning I was told to, I usually, when I go out to the ocean, and I turn left and I walk along the promenade here in front of Kaanapali Beach. And this day I was told to take my shoes off, which is interesting, which is what God told Moses at the site. Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote a poem about it. She said, "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every burning bush afire with God. And those who truly know take off their shoes, while the rest sit round and pick blackberries." And that was her poem. And God had said to Moses, "Take your shoes off. This is sacred ground here. What you are right now. When I'm sending you off, I am that I am." So I was told to take my shoes off, walk on the beach, which I haven't done for years because it's slanted and I had a hip issue and all of that kind of thing. So this day I walked along the beach, and I saw a man sound asleep on the beach. That's very rare here at this particular place, but this was somebody, he looked like he was very poor, looked like a drug addict, to tell you the truth, and a blanket over him, beard kind of thing. And I ignored him. I walked a little beyond that, and I walked up in front of the Hyatt Regency, and there was a man sitting there, and I began to talk to this man. He recognized me, and I began to talk to him, and I gave him a copy of a film I had done called The Shift, which I had with me. Thank you. And I talked to him about, he was talking to me about his wife and how much trouble it was, and he was trying everything to be nice to her and to be kind to her and just send her love, but she just kept reacting with anger and just, and I talked to him about doing what I understood in my learning as I was writing this book about I Am, this book that I'm speaking about that I just finished, Wishes Fulfilled. And one of the things it says in the I Am discourses is that as long as you have any judgment, condemnation, or criticism towards any of God's children, you will not be able to reach divine alignment with God. So judgment, criticism, condemnation. And I said, when you talk to me about your wife, you're judging her, you're criticizing her, and you're condemning her because she's not the way you want to be. Try today not doing any of those things, just with her, just for one day. And he was just he said, "Oh my God, that's going to be the good," and it turns out 2 days later I saw him again, and he's just totally transformed his relationship by just not criticizing, condemning, and judging, which is what our egos are always doing. So I touched this one person's life. It's only 5:30 in the morning. Then I walk back and I see the man laying there, and he's and I think to myself, I really need to help this man, but I wanted to give him $100, but I didn't have any money with me. So I came running back here to the apartment. It was about a 10-minute walk, and I walked upstairs and I put some money in my pocket, and I went back down and I tapped him on the shoulder, sound asleep, and he woke up startled. He was only 27, 28 years old. His name was Vince. And he just looked like I was going to be mad at him, or he thought I was the police or something like that. And I said, I could tell that he'd probably been doing drugs. His eyes were giving evidence of that. And I said to him, I put my arm around him. He didn't smell very clean and so on. And I said, I said, you know what I would like to do? I said, I would like to gift you a nice breakfast and perhaps maybe a place that you can stay. And I said, I want to just give you $100. Do whatever you want with it. And just know that you, he said, oh my God, he said, you're the first person since I've been on Maui that has talked to me as if I mattered, as if I was a decent person. And he just walked away. So now I had already, now this was two people's lives that I had touched. And I didn't give this person $100 because I'm so noble and because I'm so rich or anything like that. I gave it to him because I was compelled to, I was called to. And it wasn't what he did with the money, it was the extension of love. I got back here, I went to come upstairs to my apartment, and I realized I had grabbed the wrong key, I couldn't get in. So I live in a place where you have to get a key. So I walked down the stairs, and on the way to get another key, I run into a woman named Susan whose son was killed. He was 10 years old, and he was killed by a drunk driver 2 years ago. His name's Will Smith, from San Antonio. And I started talking to her, and when she said that she had to go testify, and she said, you know, she said, Wayne, she said, I just got a video of his second grade graduation, which I had never seen before, and tears were streaming down her face. She said, I miss him so terribly. And I said, come up with me. I went and got the key, came upstairs, and I gave her Anita Moorjani's near-death experience that she had written about, which you can find on the internet by just going to Anita M's NDE, and you'll see what her experience was like. It's 22 pages involved, and I have it copied, and I give it to people. I'll give you a copy before you leave. Thank you. And I handed it to her. I said, Susan, read this, and you will never miss Will again. You'll understand, you know. And I thought, and I came back here, and it would be, it was still 6:30, 6:45 in the morning. I had already meditated for an hour and touched 3 people's lives, all doing something that I would never have done had I not had that infusion of love. And on my 71st birthday, on the 10th of May, which was just 2 weeks after I had that experience, because it was the 28th of April when I had I was in San Francisco, and I was working on a film that I'm doing about how I found my father and forgave my father, called My Greatest Teacher. And all I wanted to do for my 71st birthday was to go out, and I took $50 bills and $20 bills, a whole stack of them. And I went out, I was in San Francisco, right across from the St. Francis Hotel. And every drug addict, every person who was fumbling through looking for plastic bottles to take back, every person, man, woman, or whatever, I just stopped them, talked to them, said something to them, and gave them $50 or gave them $20. And I walked back, and I had given away, I don't know how much I had given away, a lot of money. And I went back into my hotel room, and I thought, this is the nicest birthday that I've ever had in my life. And it wasn't like I wanted anything. I didn't want a cake. I didn't want anybody to say happy birthday for me. I just wanted to serve. And that's what's happened to me since I've had this experience with Anita, with the St. Francis thing, with the LILOU'S thing, with John of God. I have been being prepared, I believe, for my ascension. And I don't think you don't have to necessarily leave your body. I don't know. I'll go when I'm called. But in the ascension, you become the resurrection. In the resurrection, instead of the crucifixion, you become this being of light that rises above the ego and live from that place. And that's my goal, to make the world do that.
So a place of enlightenment, would you say?
Just a place of higher, just a place of light. Place of higher light. Like the images of, there are images of Jesus nailed to a cross, suffering, with thorns on his head and wounds on his fingers and his hands, rather, and his side. And there are images of Jesus transcending, going beyond this bodily form, going beyond this ego, going beyond suffering, and being a being of light. That's what I think Jesus' purpose was, to teach that. And that's what I'm doing today.
And by being here and simply by being there with our presence, we raise the frequency. That's what the dolphins taught me here.
Oh,
just being and swimming with them, we realized that just by being there, not doing anything, but you just showing up. And all of this, all what you're describing is accessible to all of us, isn't it? By just wanting to, and just spending some time walking, then you end up meeting all these people that needed your help. This is something we can all do beyond the money. The money is just the excuse to really connect.
And that's only one day's experiences. I could tell you about people that I have brought into here when my children were here. People who have had one woman whose son was seriously handicapped, and we brought him in here, and 22-year-old boy named Samir, and he asked me why do some people suffer, and I gave him a talk sitting right here, and it lifted the mother's spirits and took the anguish and the pain off of her in a way that she just walked out of here lighter again. I do it every single day. Today it's it's 11:30 in the morning. I've already done it twice. This is the second time already just today, doing this interview for you, perhaps telling this story to whoever you are out there watching. And perhaps you opening yourself up and having a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing, and as Anita says, live in the ambiguity, live in the mystery. Everything that you believe comes from what you know, but everything that's out there is mysterious. What you don't know is like what you do know is, let's say, this much. What you don't know is like this much. It's endless. What you don't know. All of your beliefs are in here, in this what you believe that you know, and all of your disbeliefs are in there. But when you start to live the ambiguity, once you start to say, I don't know, I'm just open, I'm willing, I'm allowing. I'm talking to you about as a man who's had a reputation of being on pretty solid ground over the last 40 years or so, and written 36 books about it, and lectured in public television and all over the world to huge audiences. I'm talking about stuff that a lot of people will say that's just airy-fairy crazy stuff, but at the age of 71 I realized that there's something divine. I had a woman in here 20 years old whose whole left side of her face was paralyzed, and I taught her how to go do the I am discourses and do the I am frequencies and say I am healed, I am paralysis free. 2 weeks later, she was on a stage with me in Calgary in front of 2,500 people, showing them that she had been given a prognosis of it's going to take 2 to 4 years. Her name is Nicolette, and so it just goes on and on and on. Yeah, all of us, everybody out there, you're all God. God is not something external to you. That's what religion has tried to teach you, that we're the ones who can make contact with God for you. And I say, let go of all of that and make conscious contact with God yourself, because you are God. It's the highest place within yourself.
And what I'm hearing is that the unknown is really the real. Yeah, that's what's most real, isn't it? Yeah,
it's the mysterious. It's live the great mystery. There are many things I do not understand, and I like it that way. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Wayne. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this beautiful connection. Thank you for the miracle of us sitting here today and sharing this with thousands and thousands and millions of people all around the world. We send you much love, much aloha from Hawaii.
Namaste. God bless you all. You are God, every one of you. Just keep that in mind. Wishes fulfilled.
Wishes fulfilled.
Okay.